Now let's add each. So each, I'm using underscore each here for this example because we're going to implement underscore style each later, and we're going to get to that next here. But let me just show you an example and we'll hop in and talk a little bit about each. So each takes two arguments. First thing is a list, and the second thing is a callback function. Also, we call this the iterator function, and we call it an iterator function because iterator is related to things that can be looped through. And so arrays, right, we loop through arrays. We call, that would be like this would be like the iteratee, the thing that is being iterated, and this is the iterator. But anyway, I think it's simpler just to think of it. This is a list, and this is the callback function. It's going to be called on each item in this list. Yeah? And so, suspects, the very first loop that it calls is going to be Miss Scarlett, and it's going to be passed into this function. So name would then be Miss Scarlett, right? And then it's going to keep doing this. Same thing as before. I kind of changed the naming there, but same idea. And then second, it will do the same thing with Colonel Mustard. Name would be Colonel Mustard. And we do some stuff there. And it will do that all the way through till it reaches the end of our array. Cool? Any questions about how this works? No? Okay. And there it is again when we consolidated it onto one line. Questions, comments, opinions about this version of each? Have you guys used the underscore each before? No? Have you guys used native forEach? No? Okay. So we have a mixed bag. Awesome. So this is our very first kind of functional utility. I say kind of because people who are really into functional programming would say that it's not, especially underscore's version of it, but who's counting? But more or less, it's the same idea, right? We have, we're kind of like abstracting a loop into a function, right? So instead of doing our for loop, which we've been talking about for like, I don't know, an hour now, we're using each, and each is a function. And the reason we want to do that is because it prevents errors, really, and it's more readable, right? Because it's really clear. We could say for each of this data structure, do a thing, right? It's much more readable than, for example, all of these var I equals, etc. If you say that that's less than and equal to here, that could give you an off by one error. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. So each is really awesome. We have forEach that comes for free. The reason that we're implementing underscores each is because if you notice, forEach, the way it works is you have an array, and then you say dot forEach, and you pass it a function. It's a lot harder to write than just passing that as two arguments. Because once we have to put this dot forEach situation means that it's a method on the array. And for it to be a method on an array, we have to get into prototypes and object-oriented stuff, which I already said when I mentioned this is beyond the scope of this course. But just know that that's why we're not doing this version, and instead we're doing a version where we're passing the arguments. You're welcome to do it if you're familiar with how methods work and inheritance works and stuff like that. It could be fun to implement your own array method like this, but we won't be doing that. But we could talk about it after. I'm happy to chit-chat. Okay. Cool. So let's see. Where did we leave off? Where did we leave off last? You guys remember who talked last? Was it you? Was it you? Was it you guys? Okay. This section over here. What does each do? What is each useful for?
looping through lists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And over here, what's the difference between forEach and underscore each?
Readability.
It does read different. It does read different. People would say, though, that, well, I'm going to take that back. I think it's controversial which one is more readable. I'll say that. Yes, but they do read differently. Mm-hmm.
You said for each is called on the array itself, as opposed to taking the array as an argument.
Yep, exactly, exactly. So what is this thing here? These lovely friends. This is like the gray area. You guys are all wearing gray sweaters. Great sweater club.
The underscore.
What is the underscore?
Is that one of the libraries you asked at the beginning?
Yeah, it's a library. Have any of you all used the underscore library? You have?
I used Lodash.
Yeah, you use Lodash? Okay, yeah, similar thing. Same, almost exactly the same, actually, if you ask me, really. But what, so if I said type of underscore
Object?
is an object. How do we know it's an object?
There's a dot.
It has a dot, yes. Yes, he remembers. Makes me so happy. Yeah. So somewhere in underscore's documentation, it just says like var underscore, equals an object. And then it has like each in it or something, which is a function that takes stuff. So that's the underscore. That's kind of confusing for people sometimes. The point I like to make in this workshop is that it's all the same, like repeated, but in just like oddly, like a little bit different here and there. And we kind of take things for granted and think it's a special thing, like jQuery. Like people think like the $ is a special jQuery thing, but really jQuery is just like var $ equals some function that takes like a selector or something, And it returns an object that has like jQuery magic, something like that. Yeah, so it's, it's not anything that you don't already know. Okay, great. Each. I think we exhausted that. So let's use each. What is this going to log? Did we make it? We made it to the back of the room again. You're in a group of one, so you get to answer every single time, unless Mark.
No, I'm good.
What is this
what
going
was
to
the question?
log? What is it going to log?
What's it going to log?
Mm-hmm.
It will log in order, observatory, ballroom, and library.
Yep. Exactly.